The glittering trap, the crystal chandeliers of the Grand Lexington Hotel cast dancing shadows across the marble floor as Rebecca Hayes clutched her champagne glass with trembling fingers. She had borrowed this emerald dress from her roommate, and despite how beautiful it made her feel, she couldn't shake the sensation of being an imposter among Manhattan's elite. Just 6 months ago, she had been a small-town girl from Cleveland with nothing but dreams and a marketing degree. Now, as a junior marketing coordinator at Pierce Industries, she had been invited to this charity gala more out of courtesy than genuine recognition. "Darling, you look absolutely stunning," a voice called out. Sending ice through her veins, she turned slowly, her heart sinking as she came face to face with Dylan Bennett, the man who had shattered her faith and love in herself. His perfectly styled blonde hair, designer suit, and practiced smile were all exactly as she remembered. Standing beside him was the reason for all her pain. "Hello, Dylan," Rebecca managed, keeping her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "I heard you got a position at Pierce Industries," he said with barely concealed condescension. "Marketing coordinator. How nice. Everyone has to start somewhere, right?" The blonde woman beside him laughed, a cold sound that cut through the music. Natalie Ashford, daughter of a real estate tycoon, and Dylan's new fiancée. The same woman he had been seeing behind Rebecca's back for months. The bold request Rebecca felt heat rising to her cheeks, but she lifted her chin defiantly. "Some of us prefer to earn our positions through hard work rather than family connections," she replied sharply. Dylan's jaw tightened. His current position at his father's investment firm had been handed to him on a silver platter, and they both knew it. "How ambitious," Natalie purred, touching Dylan's arm possessively. The enormous diamond on her finger caught the light like a victory banner. "It must be difficult watching him so happy without you." The words struck like daggers. Rebecca felt the stares of nearby guests, curious and pitying in equal measure. Her carefully built reputation could crumble in moments if she didn't act fast. Without thinking, she heard herself say, "Actually, I'm not here alone either." Dylan raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing at his lips. "Really? And where's this mysterious date of yours?" Rebecca's eyes desperately scanned the ballroom. She needed someone, anyone, to help her save face. Then her gaze landed on a figure standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the glittering Manhattan skyline. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing an impeccably tailored black tuxedo that suggested both wealth and taste. Even from behind, he radiated an aura of quiet power, drawing on every ounce of courage she possessed. Rebecca walked toward him, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. This was insane. She was about to ask a complete stranger to kiss her in front of her ex-boyfriend and half of New York's social elite. But the alternative, standing there while Dylan and Natalie humiliated her, was unbearable. The stranger's agreement, "Excuse me," she whispered as she approached him. "I know this sounds crazy, but I need you to do me a favor." The man turned, and Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. He was devastatingly handsome, with dark hair, strong features, and eyes the color of a stormy sea. Those eyes studied her with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously exposed and seen. "This is going to sound absolutely insane," she rushed on, her words tumbling out in a nervous stream. "But I need you to pretend to be my boyfriend for just 30 seconds. One kiss, that's all. Please." He remained silent, watching her with that penetrating gaze that seemed to read her every thought and fear. "Just one kiss," Rebecca repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "My ex-boyfriend needs to see that I've moved on, that I'm happy to." Ah! The stranger glanced past her to where Dylan and Natalie stood watching with obvious interest, then returned his attention to Rebecca. Something shifted in his expression, perhaps understanding or even sympathy. He stepped closer, and the scent of his cologne, rich and expensive with hints of cedar and spice, enveloped her. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice deep and confident, sending shivers down her spine. "Rebecca Hayes," she breathed, feeling as though time itself was slowing down around them. "Oh." "Rebecca Hayes," he said, the corner of his mouth lifting in a slight smile. "I suppose one kiss won't kill me." the kiss that changed everything before she could respond. His hand cupped her cheek with unexpected gentleness. His thumb traced her skin softly, and Rebecca felt electricity shoot through her entire body, making her breathing quicken and shallow. "Ready?" he murmured, his face now just inches from hers. Rebecca could only nod, her heart beating so frantically she thought it might burst from her chest. Then his lips met hers, and the entire world disappeared. The kiss was nothing like she had expected. It wasn't hurried or awkward or performative. It was slow, deliberate, and filled with a restrained passion that made her knees weak. His lips moved against hers with such skill and confidence that Rebecca forgot where she was, forgot why she had asked for this, forgot everything except the feeling of being in his arms. One of his hands tangled in her hair while the other wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer against his solid chest. She found herself responding with an honesty that surprised and frightened her, her fingers gripping the lapels of his tuxedo as she kissed him back with everything she had when they finally pulled apart. Rebecca was breathing heavily, her lips still tingling from his touch. In his eyes, she saw a flicker of something dark and deep, a reflection of her own surprise at the intensity of what had just happened between them. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaking slightly. Behind him, she could see Dylan's shocked expression and Natalie's furious glare. Mission accomplished. Yet somehow, the victory felt secondary to the connection she had just experienced with this mysterious man. "Happy to help," he replied, his thumb still gently caressing her cheek. "Tell me, Rebecca, do you make a habit of kissing strangers at charity galas?" She laughed nervously, almost hysterically. "This is actually my first time. I'm not usually this bold." "Brave," he corrected, with a hint of amusement in his voice. "I'd say desperate. But your word sounds better," she admitted with a small smile, reluctantly taking a step back. Immediately missing the warmth of his embrace, an unexpected invitation, Rebecca. He said her name in a way that made something tighten deep inside her. "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow? Somewhere without an audience?" She blinked in astonishment. Men like him, wealthy and confident and impossibly attractive, didn't ask ordinary marketing coordinators from Cleveland out to dinner? "Why would you want to have dinner with me?" she asked, genuinely confused. He smiled mysteriously. "Let's just say you've sparked my curiosity. I'll pick you up at 7. Where do you live?" Still not quite believing what was happening, Rebecca gave him her address. He entered it into his phone with practiced ease. "Until tomorrow, Rebecca Hayes," he said, and then he turned and disappeared into the crowd with a grace that seemed almost predatory. Rebecca stood there, touching her lips and trying to process what had just occurred. She didn't even know his name, yet she had agreed to go out with him. Was this madness, or the most romantic thing that had ever happened to her? The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Dylan tried to approach her several times, but Rebecca expertly avoided him. Bolstered by the memory of strong arms and soft lips, Natalie's glare could have melted steel, but Rebecca found she didn't care anymore. As her taxi carried her home through the glittering city streets, reality began to settle in. She had kissed a stranger, agreed to a date with a man whose name she didn't know, and for the first time in months, she felt truly alive. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. Morning after revelations, Rebecca spent the entire next day in a state of nervous anticipation that made focusing on work nearly impossible. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart leaped into her throat. She kept expecting a cancellation message, but none came. By 5 o'clock, she was barely holding herself together, staring at her reflection in the women's restroom mirror at Pierce Industries. "Get it together." "Hayes," she whispered to herself, applying lipstick with trembling hands. "It's just dinner with a gorgeous stranger who kissed you like the world was ending. Nothing to panic about." She had changed outfits 3 times that morning before settling on a simple, black dress that was professional. Enough for the office, but elegant enough for what she assumed would be an expensive restaurant. A man with his taste and obvious wealth wouldn't choose anywhere ordinary. The elevator ride down felt endless, each floor seeming to take an eternity. Rebecca had decided to meet him in the lobby rather than let him come up to her tiny studio apartment. The contrast between their worlds was already obvious enough without highlighting it further. When the elevator doors finally opened, Rebecca stepped onto the cool marble floor of the spacious lobby. The building was quiet now, with only security guards and cleaning staff going about their business. She smoothed down her dress and took a deep breath, then noticed a figure standing near the reception desk. Her breath stopped entirely. The impossible truth, he was there. The stranger from the gala, but he wasn't alone. Standing beside him was Robert Pierce himself, founder and CEO of Pierce Industries, the man whose signature was on her employment contract, owner of a billion-dollar empire. They were talking like old friends, their conversation casual and comfortable. A chill ran down Rebecca's spine as puzzle pieces began clicking into place with horrifying clarity. The expensive tuxedo, the confidence with which he had carried himself, his mannerisms as though he owned the entire ballroom. And now he was here in her building, standing next to Robert Pierce. Both men turned toward her almost simultaneously. Robert's face lit up with a warm smile that held a hint of amusement, as if he knew a secret she didn't. "Ah, there you are, right on time," Robert said cheerfully. "Rebecca, I'd like you to meet Jonathan Pierce, my son, and our new chief operating officer. He'll be overseeing operations while I prepare for retirement." The world tilted sideways. Jonathan Pierce. Not just a wealthy stranger, but the heir to the fortune. The man who would now be her boss. The man whose kiss still burned on her lips. Jonathan stepped forward, his face perfectly neutral, but she caught a familiar spark in those stormy gray eyes. A hint of mischief, perhaps, or recognition. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Hayes," he said in that same deep voice that had whispered her name last night, extending his hand formally. "I've heard you're one of our most promising marketing coordinators." Playing the part? Rebecca stared at his hand, feeling her entire world crumbling around her. He was pretending they had never met before. She should have been grateful for his discretion, but instead she felt like a complete fool. Of course he had known who she was. He had probably reviewed employee files before the gala. Her photo would have been right there. "Pleasure's mine, Mr. Pierce," she managed, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. His hand was warm and strong, the same one that had cradled her face so tenderly. When his fingers brushed against her palm deliberately, she understood this wasn't just professional courtesy. Robert continued talking about the upcoming merger with Davidson Industries, about team synergy and collaborative efforts. But Rebecca barely heard a word. All she could focus on was the memory of last night and the crushing realization of what she had done. "I think you two will work wonderfully together," Robert concluded. "Jonathan has been eager to meet the team." "Looking forward to it," Jonathan replied smoothly, still not looking away from Rebecca. "In fact, I was hoping to discuss some initial strategy ideas over dinner if Miss Hayes is available this evening." The air seemed to freeze. He was still going through with it, even after this awkward revelation, even though she now knew exactly who he was. "I believe that would be very productive." "Mr. Pierce," Rebecca heard herself say, her professionalism kicking in despite her inner turmoil, confronting reality when Robert's footsteps finally faded into the depths of the lobby. Leaving them alone, the silence between them grew thick with unspoken words. "You knew," Rebecca said quietly, her voice tight with restrained emotion. "Last night, you knew exactly who I was." "I did," Jonathan admitted without hesitation. "I review all senior staff files before major events. Your photo caught my attention immediately." "So this was all what? Some kind of game?" The hurt in her voice surprised even her. Jonathan's expression softened, and he took a step closer, lowering his voice. "If this were a game, Rebecca, do you think I'd be standing here now, risking everything? Do you think I'd be looking at you the way I am right now, in front of security cameras and potential witnesses?" She wanted to stay angry, wanted to feel betrayed, but the sincerity in his eyes made it difficult. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because," he said softly, "you asked me to kiss you before you knew about the money, the company, the name I carry. You saw me as just a man, not as Jonathan Pierce, heir to a fortune. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How precious?" Rebecca felt tears threatening but blinked them back. And now? What happens now? Everyone will think I'm sleeping my way to the top. Let them think what they want, Jonathan said firmly. I know the truth. You know the truth. But if you want to walk away right now, I'll understand. I'll make sure it doesn't affect your career. You have my word. The restaurant revelation. Rebecca looked into his face, seeing past the handsome features to the vulnerability beneath. This powerful man was offering her an out, protecting her, even as he risked his own position. I don't want to walk away, she whispered, but I'm scared. This could destroy everything I've worked for. Then we'll be careful, Jonathan said, his voice gentle. We'll keep this between us until we're ready. Until we know what this really is. The restaurant he chose was exactly as she had imagined. Intimate, expensive, and discreet. They sat in a private corner booth where soft candlelight flickered between them, creating shadows that danced across Jonathan's strong features. Tell me about yourself, Jonathan said after they had ordered. The real Rebecca Hayes, not the one from the employee file. So she did. She told him about growing up in Cleveland, about her dreams of making it in the big city, about the pottery class she took after her breakup with Dylan where she made a lopsided vase that she still treasured. She talked about her tiny apartment with its thin walls and temperamental heating, about her neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez who sang Spanish lullabies to her sick grandson. Jonathan listened with the same intensity he had brought to business meetings, but now that focus was entirely on her, making her feel like the most important person in the world. Your turn, Rebecca said. Who is Jonathan Pierce when he's not running a billion-dollar company? Unveiling the past, Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, swirling the wine in his glass. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and careful. I was engaged 3 years ago when I was still running our European operations in London. The words hit Rebecca like cold water. Jonathan had never mentioned being engaged before, had only vaguely referenced past relationships. What happened? She asked gently. Her name was Catherine Montgomery, daughter of a British banking magnate. Perfect pedigree, beautiful, intelligent. Everything my father hoped I'd find in a wife. His jaw tightened. For 8 months, I believed she loved me for who I was. Not what I could give her, she used you, Rebecca said softly. Understanding flooding through her, she was feeding confidential information to her father's firm, using me to access our internal European operation data. When I found out, she didn't even bother denying it. Just said it was business, nothing personal. Rebecca reached across the table and took his hand, feeling him flinch slightly before his fingers intertwined with hers. The worst part wasn't the betrayal, Jonathan continued, his voice rough. It was realizing how easily I had deceived myself. My father had warned me, but I wanted so desperately to believe someone could love me beyond the Pierce name. I was wrong. Not everyone is like her, Rebecca said firmly. I didn't know who you were when I asked you to kiss me. I just saw someone who looked like they might understand what it feels like to need saving. Jonathan looked up, meeting her eyes, and she saw something raw and real in his gaze. That's exactly why you terrify me, Rebecca. Because if what we have is real, if you truly see me, and not just the fortune, then losing you would break something in me I'm not sure can be fixed. A different world than don't lose me, Rebecca whispered. Don't push me away because you're afraid. The kiss across the table was soft, tentative, a promise rather than a performance. When they pulled apart, Jonathan's expression had shifted from guarded to almost hopeful. Come home with me, he said. Let me show you my world, the real one, not the corporate facade, Rebecca agreed, her heart racing with anticipation and nervousness in equal measure. Jonathan's penthouse was stunning, but what surprised Rebecca most wasn't the luxury. It was the warmth. Where she had expected cold minimalism, there was comfort. Well-worn leather furniture. Bookshelves lined with novels that had clearly been read multiple times. A grand piano with sheet music scattered across its surface. This is beautiful, Rebecca breathed. Walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering city below. This is home, Jonathan corrected, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. The only place where I can just be Jonathan, not Jonathan Pierce. Corporate heir. She leaned back against his chest, feeling safe and wanted in a way she hadn't experienced in years. Who is just Jonathan? Someone who plays piano at 3 in the morning when he can't sleep? Jonathan murmured against her hair. Who collects first edition poetry books and pretended to be someone else for so long that he almost forgot who he really was? Rebecca turned in his arms, looking up at his face. What changed? Why remember now? You, he said simply. Last night, you looked at me like I was worth saving. Today, even knowing who I am and what complications that brings, you're still here. You make me want to be the man you see when you look at me, not the one everyone expects. She pulled him down for a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened into something more urgent, more real. His hands moved through her hair, while hers explored the planes of his back. And when he lifted her into his arms and carried her toward his bedroom, Rebecca knew they were crossing a line from which there would be no return. Are you sure? Jonathan asked, setting her down gently on the edge of his bed, his hands framing her face. Because after this, I won't be able to pretend you're just an employee. I won't be able to keep my distance. Sure, Rebecca answered, pulling him down to her. I don't want distance. I want this. I want you. What happened next was tender and passionate, an exploration of each other that went beyond physical connection. Jonathan touched her like she was precious, like she was a treasure he had been searching for his entire life. And when they finally came together, moving as one in the soft lamplight, Rebecca felt something shift inside her heart. This wasn't just attraction or rebellion or a workplace romance. This was real, deep, and terrifying in its intensity. Afterward, they lay tangled in his sheets, her head resting on his chest, as his fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. What now? Rebecca whispered into the darkness. We stop hiding, Jonathan said, his voice rumbling beneath her ear. Now we tell my father, face whatever consequences come, and trust that what we have is strong enough to weather any storm. The morning decision, morning light streamed through the penthouse windows, painting golden patterns across the sheets. Rebecca woke slowly, aware of Jonathan's warmth beside her, his arm draped protectively across her waist. For a moment, she let herself simply exist in this perfect bubble, before reality came crashing back. Today they would tell Robert Pierce. Today, their secret would become public knowledge. Today, everything would change. Having second thoughts? Jonathan's sleep-roughened voice asked near her ear. Terrified thoughts, Rebecca admitted, turning to face him. His dark hair was disheveled, and without the armor of his business suits, he looked younger, more vulnerable. Your father is going to be furious. Probably, Jonathan agreed, propping himself up on one elbow. But he respects honesty more than deception. He built his empire on transparency and integrity. He won't like the situation, but he'll appreciate that we're coming to him directly, rather than sneaking around. Rebecca traced the line of his jaw with her fingertips. You're sure about this? Because once we do this, there's no going back. Everyone will know. There will be gossip, accusations of favoritism, people questioning my capabilities. Right. Jonathan caught her hand and brought it to his lips. I've spent my entire adult life making decisions based on what others expect. What's best for the company? What protects the family reputation? For once, I want to choose what I want. And I want you, Rebecca Hayes. I want the right to call you mine without looking over my shoulder. I want a future where we don't have to hide. Facing the truth 2 hours later, they stood together in the elevator, heading up to Robert Pierce's executive office. Rebecca's heart hammered so violently she was certain Jonathan could hear it. She had changed into a professional Navy dress, wanting to look competent and serious for what was coming. Whatever happens, Jonathan said, squeezing her hand briefly before the doors opened, we face it together. Robert's assistant, Margaret, looked up in surprise when they entered together. Mr. Pierce, your meeting isn't for another 20 minutes. This won't take long, Margaret, Jonathan replied calmly. Is my father available? Let me check. Margaret picked up her phone, but before she could dial, Robert's voice came from inside his office. Is that you, Jonathan? Come in and close the door, please. The office was a study in understated power, rich wood, leather furniture. Walls lined with photos documenting decades of business achievements. Robert stood by his desk in shirt sleeves, reading glasses perched on his nose, reviewing quarterly reports. He looked up as they entered, his sharp eyes immediately assessing the situation. "It's Hayes," he said carefully. "I wasn't expecting you." "Father, we need to talk," Jonathan began. But Robert held up a hand. "Before you say anything, let me save us all some time." Robert removed his glasses and set them down deliberately. "I'm not blind, son. I saw how you looked at each other last night in the lobby. And I've been in this business long enough to recognize when two people are involved." The father's wisdom, Rebecca felt her face flush hot. But Jonathan's hand found the small of her back, a silent reminder of his support. "Then you know why we're here," Jonathan said steadily. "Rebecca and I have developed feelings for each other. We wanted to be transparent about it before proceeding with any professional relationship." Robert walked around his desk, studying them both with an unreadable expression. Rebecca forced herself to meet his gaze, refusing to look away despite her nervousness. "How long?" Robert asked simply. "We met at the charity gala 2 nights ago," Rebecca answered, finding her voice. "This is very new, Mr. Pierce, but we both felt it was important to disclose it immediately rather than compromise our professional integrity." "I see." Robert crossed his arms. "And you understand the complications this creates? The potential accusations of favoritism? The scrutiny Miss Hayes will face from colleagues who may question her advancement?" "We've discussed all of that," Jonathan replied. "Which is why we're here now, asking for your guidance on how to handle this appropriately." Robert was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Then, surprisingly, his stern features softened slightly. "You know, your mother and I met when she was my secretary," he said quietly. "Everyone said it was inappropriate, that she was after my money, that I was abusing my position. The board wanted me to fire her. My father threatened to disown me." Rebecca's eyes widened in surprise. She had heard nothing about this history. "What did you do?" Jonathan asked. "I married her anyway," Robert said with a small smile, "because I loved her and she loved me, and no amount of gossip or disapproval was worth losing what we had." His expression grew sad. "I had 20 beautiful years with your mother before cancer took her. I've never regretted choosing love over convenience, son. Not once."